What's up to all my lovers of philosophy out there? It's your boy Ian from thelitunderground.com here today to drop a dope lesson in the Spiritual Ecology course criticizing Descartes with a little shades of Plato, Aristotle, Schelling, Otto Rank, Jung, Hegel, Schopenhauer. We're going to get to everybody. Heidegger in this lesson today. But we are talking about, first and foremost, Becoming Animal. Chapter 5, or I think chapter 5, maybe 6, in Becoming Animal and Earthly Cosmology by David Abram. And this is a part of the Spiritual Ecology course. And if you would like to join that, you could look in the description below for a link to the course. And this is a course where I am going to be reviewing and editing all your submissions, written submissions about these videos and about the books and a final essay for free, because I want to help you awaken your ecological consciousness, because that is one of the main solutions that we need to do to help change this world. And I will honor that and honor your growth as a person. So, and as a writer and as an eco lover, I am here for you. And this lesson is going to be dope. So, first of all, and everybody else, man, if you're seeing this and you don't care about that, at least subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to be covering in a better way now with better technology, better speaking skills, a book that you absolutely adore. And I'm going to be sitting here talking to you about that because I care about you and your growth as a person, even outside of this ecological consciousness aspect, because I love books and I love writing. And today we are opening with a Cartesian critique that is René Descartes. Mind over matter. I think, therefore I am. And Abrams performs a great critique, but I would like to start with a more poetic critique by Robert Bly in his book, News of the Universe, Poems of Twofold Consciousness. And here I am, everybody, with my dog Jackson, rest in peace. Died a couple years ago. This is an old photo, and, you know, I really was in the mind. Have you ever felt in the mind with one of your pets before? But let's read a quote by Robert Bly. Let's switch to quote view. In his book, Flight from Woman, Carl Stern retells the three dreams Descartes dreamed the night before his formulation took its final shape. Descartes was about to settle on this division. The world is made of a res cognitans, which Stern rephrases as thinking something that has no spatial quality, and res extensa, a spatial something that has no psychic quality. So we would call this the mind and matter. Descartes in his first dream found himself trying to walk in a powerful wind, and as he walked, he was bent over strongly to his left. That is to say, physically, his left side became scrunched down, compressed, or crushed. He was surprised to see other people walking upright in the same wind. This dream is especially suggestive when we consider the recent speculation, now not so recent, reported by Robert Ornstein in The Psychology of Consciousness, that the two halves of the body respond and embody the modes of the opposite brain lobe. Space apparently locates itself in the left side of the body, and we would call this the lunar side of the body in yin yoga. And this has a lot of grounding in actually the occult. That's how we got into this. The left side of the body is more the emotional side, and it connects to the right side of the brain. That's what we're talking about here. Space apparently locates itself in the left side of the body. The left side also favors feeling, music, motion, touch, in brief, the qualities that enable us to unite with objects and creatures. The right side of the body, favors the qualities we use to separate us from objects in order to get the distance necessary for analysis. Those include abstract language, concept, measurement of time, restraint of emotion, and the study of ethics and law. So, of course, that we would associate that with the right side, the left side of the brain, right side of the body. Boom, here we are. We're all bent over now, walking like Descartes. Our left side crushed, our feelings like air, the space has been pressed out. As Rilke said, everywhere I am folded, therefore I am, there I am a lie. So Descartes' first dream seems to have been a sort of prediction of what would happen, not only to himself, but to the entire society. And I'm talking about this and reading this long quote because the Cartesian reality that we are in, ladies and gentlemen, 4 minutes and 40 seconds into this video, or 5 minutes, is insurmountable. This thought process has seeped into our soul, into our hair, everywhere around us, and we need to understand this and critique it and move past it if we are going to move past it into a more loving consciousness, because Descartes' idea is necessary. This division had to happen. We can't go in with innocence. There has to be a break. There has to be a trauma. But we are here right now trying to mend that trauma, Rankian style, though, which we are going to get to in just a minute. Descartes woke from this dream, wrote it down, and tried to interpret it according to his philosophy. He then fell asleep and this time saw fiery sparks floating in the room. After this second dream, he got to sleep with difficulty. In his third dream, some terrifying things happened. A book disappeared from his hand. A book appeared at one end of his table, vanished, and appeared at the other end. And the dictionary, when he checked it, had fewer words in it than it had a few minutes before. I suspect that we are losing some of the words that inhabit the left side. Our vocabulary is getting smaller. The disappearing words are probably words such as mole, ocean, praise, whale, steeping, baiter, wooden tub, moist cave, sea wind. Damn, everybody. Robert Bly just killed it, because that is what's lessening for my language. If you are reading this course, you understand that. The published works of our era, unless we're getting it, like I said, the outliers exist, but are becoming more city-like, becoming more flat. They are not seeping out the words and life of consciousness, because our brain is connected to nature, everybody. I'm sorry. We can access this infinite portal of imagination, and we are not being honored through the publishing houses and even the writers who are trying to write today with that infinite potential of consciousness. I don't know why. Maybe you have some speculations and want to say something in the comments, because you can say what you want in the comments and I will respond in a kind and loving way. Boom. There it is, everybody. Where are we in reality? What kind of reality are we living when we are all bent over, our left sides all scrunched? That's what's happening. I'm not even going to get into yoga for author stuff, but check that out on thelitunderground.com to help liven your body, everybody. Because let's talk about a quote from the actual text. And there's going to be a lot of quotes today, and this is going to go deep, everybody. So I hope you're along for the journey, because we are talking philosophy. Shall we prolong the painful split between mind and body by continuing to neglect our carnal entanglement with this immense presence? Or shall we finally heal that age-old wound by acknowledging Earth's implicit involvement in all of our experience, as the solid ground that supports all of our certainties, and the distant horizon that provokes all of our dreams? That was by David Abram. And then Novalis, quote, "The seat of the soul is where the inner world and the outer world meet, where they overlap. It is in every point of the overlap." Boom. Even the poets know it, everybody. So let me prepare my notes. So we have entered Newton's sleep, everybody, after the Cartesian break between matter and consciousness. And what is that? What was that breaking of consciousness? Well, one side saw this. Excuse me. And this isn't from Abram's interpretation, and this could be argued, but there is mind, and that is God. And he has infinite psychic potential. Then there is matter, and that is animals, wild plants, and all those things, and they don't possess that. And we, as humans, are a mix of that. And, you know, the Catholic guilt and all the trauma and all the pain and shame in religions grabbed that up, and they took it and ran with it. So... a little scary, right? But this is where the boat is now, everybody. If you were watching, there is a shipped boat. It looks like in the desert. This is where we are now, man. We are an abandoned boat in a desert, because we have lost the flair. We have lost the style that we need, because we need to start to move toward interacting with nature itself in its objectified form. Because let's talk about a couple things. Before man, let's talk about God. And we could refer to God as nature, higher consciousness, the upper plane of energy, maybe just synapses in the brain, I guess, maybe. But before man was on Earth, nature had... And okay, before we get into this, I am now bringing German idealism into this, everybody. We have now brought in, because... Abrams brought Spinoza in, and Spinoza is a very interesting philosopher. not just for his works and his ethics and what we're going to be talking about today, unitary God consciousness, but for the lineage that he created. Because after Spinoza, suddenly we get Schelling and Hegel. They take it and run with that. And then after that, we get maybe a little bit of Nietzsche. Maybe not. Nietzsche could maybe be another camp. But we for sure kind of move into Schopenhauer. And then we move into psychoanalytical thought and Heidegger. And then phenomenology. Modern phenomenology. Ponty. Even now we get into maybe Deleuzian. It's kind of this very interesting chain. If you had to describe, if we only could, have 5 or 10 philosophical lineages, classic ones, and it kind of actually starts, but we don't even need to get into that. And this all goes back to, Greece and, the ancient philosophers. So there is a lot of big names I just said in there within this framework of Spinoza. And I feel like that is the most interesting, most potent, and most livable aspect of philosophy when we actually look at it. So Spinoza really started to push this oneness of God, mind, and nature idea. And that there is no separation. It is not in the body. It is being. It is not like a Reichian interpretation of the body. It is Dasein. It is the Heideggerian being of beingness. On fundamental ontology. Our consciousness is not unique. There is this pervasive power. And then that was taken by Schelling. And Schelling says, if we want to read a little bit of Schelling, if we can maybe find it in here. Boom, right here. Schelling, coming in, everybody. To the transcendental philosophy, nature is nothing but the organ of self-consciousness, and everything in nature is only necessary because only through such a nature can self-consciousness be achieved. And then, okay, so let's talk about that real fast before we get to even the second quote. So going back to this idea. So this is a German ideal, more of some German idealism, because Abrams kind of comes to a similar conclusion through Plato and Aristotle, which I thought was very clever and something I hadn't actually thought of myself. So we'll get into that. But just because you probably have read this, let's talk about basically the same angle, which is, let me prepare my notes. So before man, we're going to assume before man came, nature had God as its other, or God has nature as its other, because we have nature and it's a part, it's almost an other to us because we are somewhat separate from it, even though we aren't. There's this weird separation between us, and Abrams has actually dissolved that. He has dissolved that with this argument, which I thought was cool. But continuing on, but prior to nature, God's mirror was the unconscious, because man, okay, this is what I should say, man becomes realized through nature. And that is the same argument as that Abrams is making, that man's consciousness can be realized through our sensory perception of nature. But then God became conscious of himself maybe through nature. And prior to nature, God's mirror was the unconscious, and looking at the unconscious made God conscious. And maybe nature is the manifestation of God's consciousness. You know, like I said, I know a lot of people have a lot of trauma with the word God and all that, but we could, like I said, think of it in many different deities or forms or whatever we want to think of it as. And this is the dark fire, as Jacob Bohme talks about, because what is that mirror of unconscious? What is that dark potentiality, that dark bedding that is laying? I'm messing up the verbs, everybody. The dark potentiality at the bottom of consciousness. What is that we access? That is so cool. And he says that pervades everything in all of consciousness, because consciousness came out of the dark, or has this shade of darkness, that everything thus is dark. And that, that is a whole different plane of thinking. Super cool stuff. And if we regard nature as mechanical, which a lot of people do, it only means that we ourselves have become too mechanical. We haven't seen enough and felt enough in nature yet. We haven't developed that phenomenological consciousness with nature yet. And there's a new dualism within this, though, that this Cartesian mindset, the separation of the body and mind. But one of the mendings that we see in this line of thinking more recently is through Otto Rank. And Otto Rank was Sigmund Freud's secretary. And much like Wilhelm Reich and Jung, who were also very close to Freud, Otto Rank took and figured out his own theory of the unconscious. And I think it fits most with what we're trying to say. And he said that the unconscious is that which we've been unexposed to, and can only happen through, and us finding our unconscious and us revealing that and healing the trauma can only happen through our will, putting ourselves out in the world, or through our art. Freud would say maybe it's a sexual trauma, or maybe, it's just like a deep, abandonment trauma. Jung would say we could heal it through the collective unconscious and moving through archetypes through an active imagination. Reich would say it's in the body and we need to rolf or do certain measures to the body to get it out. But Rank says that it's through our will. It's through in his book, Art and Artist, the creative urge and personality says that it is healed through the will. And the will can be activated in a very easy way through art, but also through action and through seeing the world and having sensory perceptions, creates and fills in our unconscious. And that thus heals ourselves. And that could be nature. That could actually be a metaphor for nature. And I just wanted to bring all this in, everybody, to kick this thing off, because this is something that wasn't addressed by Abram. So if you've been having trouble understanding this chapter, there's a perspective of that. But now we're going to move more into what Abrams is talking about in Plato and Aristotle. But let's read this second quote real fast just to wrap this up. The Hegelian God as a starting point is at first being per se and unconscious. Only God as a result is being for self, and conscious is spirit. That the attaining to being for self, the becoming an object to self, is really a coming to consciousness, is clearly expressed by Hegel. The theory of the unconscious is necessary, presupposition of every objective or absolute idealism, which is not unambiguously theism. And pause that, chew that up. I'm not going to harp on that too hard for you guys, because that will take us a long time to talk about. So let's do a little bit more of Cartesian. So one of the primary dichotomy in Descartes' philosophy, after all, was not the divisions between mind and body, but rather the divide between the mind and the whole of the material world. And that was a quote from Abram. And this detachment that the Cartesian split gave us a superpower, because we didn't have to care anymore. We could treat nature, we could do what we want, we could even treat humans in this hierarchical way. And a lot of people do this with emotions. A lot of people who work jobs, lawyers, have to give up and cremate their care. There is this and a lot of dark occult people do this, is that they kill their emotions. They use rituals to kill their higher and joyful emotions. And this is something they're doing, just like you work to become better at your job. They work at eliminating this so they can make more ruthless decisions without being affected as much by their animal brain, animal emotions, human emotions, whatever we want to call them. So, quote again, every sensible phenomenon had its own mental aspect. Every tangible body within the material world was also an idea within the vast encompassing intelligence that was known inwardly to some as God and outwardly to all of us as nature. And it's basically, he's saying that it's all the same. Our conscious reflection came through nature, not through our interactions with ourselves, not through our own. So like what we were saying is that we became conscious through nature. And another way to put this is our brain is powered by our body. If our body wasn't here, our brain probably wouldn't be here. Our body was nourished by nature. And that's another way to kind of reduce this down to more simple terms. And this kind of gets cool because like rain and weather, for instance, change our mood. There's this, why does that happen? Is it because I've learned that darkness is bad through conditioning or through movies and the darkness and rain? Is it all that, or is it a certain programming, a code? And one of the main cool things that David talks about in this is that ideas live outside of us. Ideas are not and this is the framework, everybody. This is a lens that we can view the world through. And this is a very potent personal development lens that can help you grow. And you don't have to hold on to it. But if you do look at it through this angle, you can gain a lot as a thinker, writer, and even this is huge in postmodernism, that ideas and emotions live outside of us, that they are not a part of us. And I always think of like an MMA fight, or if you've ever been to like a sports arena, suddenly you could almost be deaf, be blind and deaf and feel a certain change in the air in that like sports environment. Things start to get a little different out there. And it's also kind of weird because when you view emotions outside of yourself, you view them as this ancient, ancestral thing that you can tap into, like anger, for instance. And there's many different hues of anger that we can tap into. But just anger in general, if it exists outside of us and ideas exist outside of us, then that means that there's this ideal out there, that there is this higher transcendental signifier, as Plato would say, and that's what we're going to transition into right now. So let me know in the comments about your thoughts about ideas and emotions being outside of ourselves and what that could mean for personal development, because like I said, it can actually help us hone into our emotions a little bit more and understand that we have to, it's a two-way signal with emotions almost. And when you look at it, you feel this eerie sense with emotions. Like when you get angry or sad, you're like, you almost become too meta and like self-conscious of consciousness, conscious of the emotion. And you start like almost tripping over yourself while you're thinking about it. But another almost argument that David makes is that the solitary insights that we have while we're at the sea, that while we're at the heights on a cliff, in deserts, in mountains, in swamps, where did these come from? Because unconnected people throughout history and even people now have these weird similar thoughts out in nature. Certain philosophies start to breed. Like in the desert, we have this invisible landscape and pure potential, but also pure death and fanaticism and hardcore religious fervor take over. Out in the desert, it's pretty crazy. But out in the woods, people get chopped up a little bit more and things get a little bit more intense. And then the sea is more flowy and oceany, but there's also this more cyclical connection. All these things are really cool. And the next big transition that we're going to make is that David talks about how ideas and species being as words were once synonymous with each other. And he connects it back to the Greek word eidos, which means visible look or outward form. And so this helps us transition to Plato and the transcendental signifier. And the transcendental signifier is very important to all this because without the line, this is where things get a little bit crazy. Without the Hegel Schelling line, we probably wouldn't have got Heidegger. And without Heidegger, we probably wouldn't have gotten Derrida, who then broke the transcendental signifier with his gap. And we'll have to talk about that at another time. But he took over Saussure's really new signifier. Really, it literally happened in the same year or two that they like his theory, got broken, as some would say. Saussure's theory of the signifier, transcendental signifier, was shown to be a little bit maybe obsolete by Derrida's proposition. But we'll have to talk about that later. But so Plato, Greek philosopher, student of Socrates, mentor of Aristotle, talked about immaterial forms and transcendental signifiers. So I'm going to take this chair back here, for instance. We have this chair back here. So this chair is a chair in this room, and there are chairs in this room, and they are chairs of a lower form. And then there are chairs also out in the world. But then there is the highest chair of all. There is a chair that is the most chairness of chairs, right? The highest aesthetic of beauty. There's nothing higher than that. Then everything like this is a lower form of that. And that is the highest idea. And this can be brought into language. This is something that can that got carried into religion, but it can also be carried with language and creativity and with certain ideas. But this did get carried, and like I said, tells us here. But then the word ideas, like I said, if we're talking about if they're outside of us, connect to Plato's idea of this transcendental signifier. These ideas and these emotions, if they're these archaic things, they are the angriness of anger, for instance. And idea is the feminine version of eidos. That was something that Abram said. So Plato would then say nature is ephemeral sensations. They are the ideal ideas. Nature out here is a world of all these different objects that have this higher significance out there. And that's a pretty cool thing to talk about and to think about. And cultures would worship, if we look at earth-based spirituality, that's what it's all about. Seeing every being and object as its highest transcendental signifier, not as Aristotle would say. Let me gather my notes. Next page. Aristotle's different use, which is not down with the signifier, which didn't really want to talk about that. So he grouped it into a collective group of individuals who share a common form. So like this chair and the chair I'm in right now and the chairs in the other room, the qualities that all make them a chair that are like our most common are what makes it a chair. That's what really gets it up. Not the highest form of a chair, but the really collective similarities. And so this starts the movement toward grouping together, though, and that started moving toward the Cartesian model of fracturing of consciousness, though. An idea should remain ephemeral. Ideas, though, so ideas are connected to Plato. And when we talk about ideas, they still remain kind of transcendental when we think about ideas and dreams and when people talk about it. Our language kept ideas as out there. Ideas are ideas. They aren't action. But species remain grounded through Aristotle. And that's what the classifications and the groupings, that's what kind of turned into species, such as a species of trees, even though I don't know if that's the right word, but the classification system. I think that's super cool. But now we've had a break because ideas have become private ethereums of an individual's mind. Ideas now don't live out and can't attach themselves to transcendental signifiers. They have just been reduced to our own brains and the ideas in our brain, but not of the outside world. We've become selfish people. And like I said, our ancestors held this idea of earth. So David then talks about this exercise that he does, which I thought was pretty cool. That when a fly buzzes, you should think of an annoying thought. So pretend there's a buzz. I should think of an annoying thought that connects to the fly, and then start looking, and then move from that to shifting my consciousness to right where the fly is, and then focus on the fly and give some thought and phenomenological awareness to the fly, and then suddenly the fly should go away. And I don't know the validity of that, but that's what we're trying to look. Spiritual Ecology course. Shout out everybody. That's a pretty cool exercise. So now we're going to transition to a new concept. So if you guys have any questions about that Plato and Aristotle and even Otto Rank and Schelling, if you guys have any questions, just let me know. And like I said, this really isn't a proving, disproving session, but if I wasn't clear enough, let me know. So now we're going to kind of try to tether the mind to Earth. Because what if our mind is Earth's mind? What if our mind is really not our own brain stuck in this consciousness, but it's Earth's mind? And it's maybe a property of the Earth itself. We are immersed in the power of Earth. Our brain is a part of the Earth. Maybe our awareness has been generated as a medium because we are so immersed in it because of that self-reflection with Earth. Quote, and let's see if we can find this one. Oh, I guess not, everybody. So I'm going to shout out a quote here. Oof, these are beautiful photos. Everyone who's watching this presentation. Is not awareness, too, a kind of medium or atmosphere, a capacity that blooms within us, swelling and subsiding, only because we are penetrated by it, encompassed by it, permeated? Are we not born into mind as into an unseen layer of earth, gradually opening ourselves to the nourishment of this medium, adapting ourselves to its lunar rhythms, aligning ourselves with the way it glimmers and sings in our particular species? Are we not gradually opening up to the nourishment of consciousness of the earth? Adapting our bodies adapt, like you said, to lunar rhythms, the menstrual cycle. These things are unexplainable. And the way that we align ourselves with it, isn't that how we formed as a species? Isn't that how consciousness formed? We need to acknowledge Earth's implicit involvement in all of our experience, because our brain is probably an analog, talking about Schelling and all this stuff, an analog to the Earth. And this connects to a lot of ideas in spirituality, that you have to raise the beacon. You have to open the beacon with energy. But once we start believing in energy, we have to believe that the earth, the most powerful energy source of all, which our consciousness realized itself through on this earth as human species. We are not aliens, ladies and gentlemen. We are not anything else. Our human species did this on earth. We can talk about intervention theory and aliens and all that stuff too, and that maybe is how we became conscious, but we are not doing that here today in the Spiritual Ecology course. So that's what we're talking about. And I'm going to maybe just go on for a couple more minutes about this, but thank you guys for hearing that out. And the brain and our capacity within our own brain, I'm just going to be running through these slides if you guys want to see some beautiful photos, becomes conscious through itself, and then nature is the organ. And spending more time in nature, practicing the principles of spiritual ecology, helps strengthen that. And when that is strengthened, our consciousness is strengthened. We get more of the world. We start to see more depth. And this can even start with, like I said, with a lot of things like spirituality. And starting to understand these concepts and removing the Cartesian break within our own consciousness. Stopping seeing the world, stopping our habit of seeing the world from an upward lens and coming back down to the ground and seeing the depth within it. So let's talk about the journal assignment, everybody. I have a lot of great photos. I mean, how are you guys doing? Thank you guys for coming on this journey with me. I thought this would maybe go a little longer, be a little bit harder, but suddenly I'm at the end. I'm like, I don't really need to prove this. If you believe in the consciousness power that Earth has, if you have felt into that, that's why you're at this course right now. That the Earth has a tone, it has a hue, it has a buzz, and that really, I think, brings out an awareness within us and maybe brought out the first inklings of awareness. So let's do a little journaling. So write 100 to 200 words about the text. Let's pull this up in an intuitive way, or intuitively. If you are stuck, pick passages to deep read and explicate. And here's an optional journal idea. Stream of consciousness, write for 10 to 30 minutes about anything you want. And then when you're done with that, read about what you wrote and connect up to 5 ideas to memories or experience, 5 ideas to memories that you've had or experiences in nature. Oh man, I'm so sorry about the typos. I actually fixed this but didn't copy it over. Feel boundaries dissolve between your own writing and nature with this exercise. And the last 2 fucking videos, and now this being the third, have had typos. So I'm sorry. I don't, like I prepare all this stuff and I make notes and I do photos, and like these slides are the last to go. And sometimes I'm like really revving to make, start talking. So sometimes that happens. So feel the boundaries dissolve. So pretend you write for 30 minutes, or 10 minutes. Look back, and you're gonna see that there's this separation. And you could be writing about your past relationship, but there's gonna be ideas that you can stem back to nature, to the transcendental signifiers in nature that you give praise to. You'll be able to tap into that with your writing and with this exercise. So check that out, everybody. Thank you guys for being here. Let's thank everybody who's been involved in this video. Peace.